All right. So we have been having a lot of conversation about allergies and histamine and migraines and in our migraine mastery program. And so I thought that you guys might also have some of these questions. Springtime is a really hard time for people with migraines because there's a lot of stuff going on. There's the change in the daylight savings time. There's a lot of weather and storm things that are coming up. There's allergy season. So I think that it's really important to kind of talk about how allergies and histamine is playing a role potentially for you, since it's kind of ubiquitous. I mean, I find that probably 90% or more of people that I work with with chronic migraines have, like, spring is their worst time because of allergy seasons, even if you don't necessarily have like really bad seasonal allergies. So my name is Dr. Tanya Paynter, or also known as Dr. P, if you're not familiar with me. And so I just wanted to kind of run through kind of what histamine is, how it's affecting our migraines. And then I also have a link to some antihistamine, kind of an antihistamine support protocol to at least get you through the next month or two of seasonal allergy time. So let me get started by just kind of describing what histamine is. So histamine is an organic compound released in the body by the immune system to kind of help stir things up and create inflammation around an area of injury or infection. It's actually very important, but when we have too much of it, obviously that causes problems. So, and it also functions as a neurotransmitter for us. So it's a very, very important molecule. The problem comes when we have way too much of it, either because we can't break it down properly, we're releasing too much of it all the time. Maybe we've got an underlying chronic infection going on, a viral infection or something that we just haven't been able to kick, that's constantly keeping our immune system revved. Maybe we're eating foods that we didn't know we have issues with that are causing histamine release. Whatever the case may be, there can be several underlying reasons. But histamine intolerance is not actually an allergy to histamine. It's actually caused by the presence of too much histamine in the body. So we want to try to do things to help reduce histamine burden. I always use the idea of the bathtub, right? When our bathtub is full and the water starts to overflow, that's when we get our migraines. Well, the water in this case might be halfway filled because your body has too much histamine and now it's being exposed to even more. And suddenly you're having a lot of histamine related migraines. So histamine is a well-known trigger for migraines because of how it interacts with nerves, pain pathways, with blood vessel constriction and dilation. And then it also, because of how it plays with other neurotransmitters as well. And so there was an interesting study from 2018 that came out that showed that almost 90% of people with chronic migraines have a low level of the histamine that of the enzyme that breaks histamine down, and we'll get to that in a minute. So there's a very high chance that if you have chronic migraines, that this is a problem for you. So what kind of symptoms do we look for from a histamine overload? Well, if you have seasonal allergies, and especially if they're flaring right now, that's definitely a good clue. But other things, if you have a chronic runny nose, if you have a lot of sneezing or red watery eyes, I mean, if you think about some of those allergy symptoms, sinus and nasal congestion, digestive issues, so unexplained diarrhea or, cramping, things like that. If you're allergic to a lot of stuff, you have multiple allergies, all of those can indicate a histamine problem. And then there are also some medications that actually suppress the enzyme that breaks down histamine. So antibiotics will suppress that enzyme, so you'll get an increase in histamine release. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, diuretics, muscle relaxers, so PPIs or proton pump inhibitors for like heartburn and GI stuff. So there's a lot of really commonly used medications, especially in a migraine picture, that will actually suppress the DAO enzyme that breaks down histamine. So what is DAO? Diamine oxidase is the enzyme that will break histamine down to help your body get rid of it. And it's related to a gene, specifically also by that name, the DAO gene. So if you have a strong family history of allergies, MCAS, multiple chemical sensitivities, mast cell degranulation or mast cell activation syndrome, all of those, if they run in your family, then there's likely going to be a genetic component. And there's things that you can also do to address that genetic DAO as well. So you can look into that a little bit further. That's not going to be the topic of our conversation for today. But I want to give you some actionable tips to kind of start doing now while we're kind of in the midst of bad allergy pollen release season. And then if you're watching this in the future, this is a really good thing to start in February of the year, of the upcoming season. So if you have a really bad spring allergies that usually typically start kind of hitting around March-ish, we want to start it a good month before. So I usually say start your antihistamine protocol and practices in February to really make sure that you're giving your body as much support as possible moving into those springtime allergies. So number one is, and you might have heard of this before, low histamine diet. Histamine foods, foods can contain histamine, but they can also release histamine in the body. So things like tomatoes and peppers, potatoes, strawberries, avocados, any fermented foods, things like that can be high histamine. And believe it or not, leftovers will actually increase histamine because the certain bacteria will actually produce histamine as it grows. So as your leftovers stay a little bit longer in the fridge, it will kind of compound that histamine. So ideally around allergy time, you don't want to have histamine or have leftovers. You want to actually make your food as fresh as possible. Really super helpful when you don't feel good already, right? Having to make everything from scratch. But you can also look at doing kind of a low histamine diet. You can also look at doing DAO support and help to break histamine down a little bit. So there's supplements out there, they're pretty pricey, but it can help you to kind of, it's almost like a digestive enzyme in a way, but it's digesting histamine specifically. So before it even gets into your body, it helps to break the histamine down, and that can help to reduce your body burden of histamine, especially, and give you a little bit more leniency on the histamine foods that you might be able to eat. There are certain supplements that we want to help support an antihistamine protocol. And again, I have a link that I will put in the comments for you as well. It will take you to the protocol on a platform called FullScript. FullScript is it's a physician controlled, high quality supplements that you have to have, a specific link to a doctor's quote unquote store, a dispensary, so that you can have access to it. So it is kind of moderated by physicians and very tightly controlled quality wise, so that you don't have to worry about, is this going to be a forgery? Is this not good quality? That kind of thing. So all physician grade, quality controlled supplements on there, which is one of the reasons that I love it. So the link that I have is to my store, and you can certainly access it and the protocol that comes with it. But I'll kind of review some of the supplements that we're going to be talking about in there. So number one, you want to do something that's going to help support some bioflavonoids. So there's quercetin. Quercetin and nettles are actually a very good combination, and that's one of my favorite supplements that I have in that protocol. Works really well as long as you don't have any allergies, known allergies to quercetin and nettles. Quercetin not only helps with allergies and antihistamine, but it's also an antiviral. So it's really good to have on hand regardless. And vitamin C, high dose vitamin C is also very good at helping to kind of reduce the release of histamine. So when we're talking about high dose, we're talking 4 to 6 grams of vitamin C. Not everybody tolerates that high of a dose. It can cause some GI issues, not constipation, but diarrhea. Loose stools is kind of the number one thing. And then also, a lot of gurgling activity and potentially some cramping. So we obviously don't want to have that much. If you or have those symptoms. So if you try it at, and I always recommend starting at a low dose and working up to see what your body will tolerate. But 4 is kind of where we want to aim for, kind of that low level during allergy season. If you can get upwards of 6, that's great, but you don't have to. It's still effective at 4. So definitely make sure that you're monitoring that and you start low and working up. The one that I have listed in this protocol is buffered to help with any burning, because if you get just straight vitamin C, for some people that have sensitive tummies, that can actually, the acidity can actually be problematic and very irritating. So we definitely don't want to flare any heartburn or ulcer or anything like that. So buffered vitamin C is often a lot more gentle. And then we have other things like curcumin or turmeric is also, again, very good general anti-inflammatory, but also helping with that histamine piece as well. So you can check that protocol out. But a couple things that I did want to talk about real quick is to bring your attention to supplements that you should be staying away from during allergy season. So nobody really talks about what you should not be taking, but there are actually a lot of probiotics, a lot of common probiotics, such as certain lactobacillus species, which is found in most over-the-counter probiotics. That actually, a lot of those strains can be prohistamine. So those bacteria can produce histamine in the gut. So that can be a problem if you've already got some of those histamine issues going on. And so ones that are safe is Lactobacillus rhamnosus and Lactobacillus plantarum. And also any of the bifidobacterium species are going to be safe to use there. You don't want any of the other Lactobacillus or Streptococcus strains. And again, this is just for, allergy season, but if you have a problem with histamine all year long, you're going to want to avoid those altogether. The other really important supplement that I want to make sure you guys are not taking if you're having histamine problems are methyl B vitamins. So there's methylfolate and methylcobalamin. In some of your higher end, better quality supplements, they use the form of MTHF for folate or methylfolate, and they use methylcobalamin. Those are fantastic forms of those vitamins, very useful in cellular processes without having to do anything to change them into the useful form. However, the methyl groups from those particular B vitamins will attach to histamine and create what's called methylhistamine. And that is like histamine on steroids. It's Superman histamine. So it'll go around and kind of wreak even more havoc if you're taking those methyl supplements. So that's something to really consider. If you've been prescribed methylfolate for a known genetic dysfunction or some other, therapeutic reason, then you need to have a conversation with your doctor. Definitely do not stop anything you've been prescribed, but bring it up to them and let them know, hey, I'm really struggling with these histamine-related allergies or histamine-related allergies. That's kind of redundant. Histamine-related migraines. What can we do? How can we modify this methyl piece during this, the next 4 to 6 weeks? So just wanted to make sure that I brought your attention to that, because not a lot of people are kind of thinking about what should I be avoiding. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, the link to my favorite antihistamine supplements are there. The last piece that I'll leave you with is just that these are almost Band-Aid supports during this season. But if you are struggling with histamine, and histamine is a reason behind your migraines, you know that Benadryl works for you to abort a migraine. That's a pretty good indicator that there's a histamine component, at least somewhat, right? If Benadryl is part of your cocktail. It's not just about taking these supplements and reducing histamine. It's about making your body more effective at getting rid of histamine. And there are definitely ways that we can do it. There's nutrients that we can help support. And there's a lot of things that go into helping to manage that histamine piece. There's been some recent studies that are showing that MCAS or mast cell activation syndrome is very closely linked with migraines in a lot of people. They're starting to find this overactive histamine and mast cell component to people with migraines, with chronic migraines. So, if that's something that you're struggling with or something that you're having, that you've been diagnosed or are looking into for you, that's very common. And we really need to focus in on how your body is able to produce DAO. There are other ways that your body breaks things down, MAOA, COMT, those are also very important. And I won't go into those. I've actually gone into those before on certain other videos relating to hormones and neurotransmitters. Actually, they're all interconnected. So be that as it may, the short version of what I'm trying to say is it's not enough to just take a supplement to help with it in the short term. If you've identified this as a problem for you, this is something that we can address from a biochemical standpoint and make your body more effective at being able to break it down and not release so much of it in the first place. So that is something that if you have issues with, feel free to reach out. We are happy to help you kind of figure out what that looks like. And you can learn a little bit more about our approach to treating migraines at migrainemastery.org. I'll link that below the video as well. And we hope that this is helpful.